Today, Senate Republicans unveil a new infrastructure spending bill to counter President Biden's proposal. How much is it worth and what's in it? How much does the average American pay in taxes throughout their lifetime? We have the answer, and it might surprise you. And Iran is the latest country to crack down on Bitcoin mining. China did the same last week, so does it open up an opportunity for American entrepreneurs? That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Good evening. Great to have you with us. We're expecting President Biden's first full budget tomorrow, and apparently it's a big one. As big as $6 trillion, that'd be the most expensive budget since World War II when compared to the size of the economy. The government is set to play a bigger role in the economy, and naturally, that'll come with higher public debt. The budget will include major investments in infrastructure, education, healthcare, according to the New York Times. But the proposal is just setting the stage for further negotiations. Democrats have a narrow majority in Congress, but they may have to rely again on a process called reconciliation to pass the spending bills without Republican support. And Senate Republicans have a new offer to counter President Biden's infrastructure proposal. They say it's close to what Biden laid out earlier, but sticks to what's traditionally considered infrastructure. NTD's Arlene Richards has the story.
Good morning, and I want to thank everybody for...
Senate Republicans unveil a new $928 billion counteroffer Thursday to President Biden's infrastructure plan. Last week, the White House agreed to remove more than $500 billion from Biden's original plan. It's now at $1.7 trillion.
Senate Republicans continue to negotiate in good faith. We've had a lot of good dialogue with the White House. We're trying to get to that common goal of reaching a bipartisan infrastructure agreement.
Senator Capito says the Republican offer delivers on what Biden laid out during a May 13th meeting at the White House.
And that is to try to reach somewhere near $1 trillion over an 8-year period of time that would include our baseline spending. We have achieved that goal with this counteroffer.
A Biden official later said they're seriously considering the Republican proposal. The main sticking point comes down to the definition of infrastructure. Republicans want the bill limited to physical assets like roads and bridges.
That's what people at home in Wyoming think of as infrastructure. It's, roads with potholes that need to be fixed.
While the White House wants to include social spending programs and education, Biden has imposed an unofficial end of May deadline on the negotiations, and some Senate Democrats have been pushing to go it alone if Republicans do not reach an agreement soon. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And if you're still waiting on a $1,400 stimulus check, it could be on the way. A new batch was just dispersed, bringing the total to $390 billion worth. But half of the checks went to people who were eligible for more after filing for 2020 taxes. The IRS will keep sending checks out to people who they previously didn't have information for but now do because they recently filed that return. So, even if you don't normally file tax returns, the IRS wants you to file anyway because you might qualify for additional payments. They say there are only two certainties in life, death and taxes. But do you ever wonder just how much you'll actually pay over the course of your life? The number might surprise you. NTD's Phil Zoe brings us there.
The average American pays $500,000 in lifetime taxes.
People are paying more than $500,000 in taxes.
That's according to fintech company Self. The taxes were based on 4 tax categories: income, property, auto, and sales. New Jersey taxpayers topped the list with an average of nearly $1 million.
They have high property taxes. They're a high income tax state now.
West Virginia pays the least at $300,000. Each state taxes differently. Some charge more on income or business, while others on property. CPA Paul Miller says there are also hidden taxes like your phone bill, which people are not aware of.
That might not seem a lot, but if you pay $1,000 a year for your cell phone bill, 300 of it going to taxes is a lot of money.
Owning a car can also cost thousands of dollars in tax payments.
But I think in the end of the day, the cities that offer a lot to people, the people will pay for it.
New York and California pay the most lifetime taxes on everyday expenses at around $40,000. Phil Zhou, NTD News, New York.
And a cafe owner in Texas says the Small Business Administration is discriminating against him because he's white. And a federal judge is siding with him. NTD's Christina Kim has the story.
Cafe owner Philip Greer is likely to succeed in his lawsuit against the Small Business Administration. That's what U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor says. The Biden administration issued a directive that prioritizes pandemic relief funds to restaurants that are owned by women, veterans, and people considered socially and economically disadvantaged, referring to Native Americans, Blacks, Latinos, and Asians. For the first 21 days, the S.B.A. is only processing applications from this group. Proponents say these now prioritized groups have faced systemic discrimination, and these programs help address these issues and create more equity. But Greer, who is white, is arguing that the policy actively excludes entire classes of Americans not mentioned in the priority group who are also suffering significant financial losses caused by the pandemic. He reportedly lost $100,000 during this time. And according to the S.B.A., the priority group requested a total of $29 billion in funds as of mid-May. The Restaurant Revitalization Fund only has $28.6 billion, meaning there isn't enough money left for Greer. Legal analyst John Malcolm says these race-based classifications must be under strict scrutiny.
That means that the government has to demonstrate that they have a compelling interest in coming up with a law that makes racial classifications, and that the law is narrowly tailored to achieve that compelling interest.
But he says the government needs to prove this interest per industry. And according to the judge, the S.B.A. hasn't demonstrated there was discrimination in the restaurant industry that would justify this. So the question seems to remain, can the U.S. government tell some people they have to wait for help because of their race or gender? Malcolm says there will be plenty of instances these issues will be challenged, especially under the Biden administration.
The Supreme Court has obviously considered race-based classifications in a variety of areas, including government contracting, laws providing funds such as this Restaurant Revitalization Fund. They've obviously considered racial preferences in admissions schemes at colleges and universities, and the law is unsettled in that area.
Malcolm says ultimately these programs discriminate based on race, and that this issue could use further clarification from the courts. Christina Kim, NTD News.
And a group of Republican states are warning the Biden administration not to undermine key industries in their states. 15 state treasurers say Biden's climate chief, John Kerry, privately pressured banks not to lend to companies in traditional energy industries like oil, gas, and coal. They even want the government to stop interfering in the free market, calling the administration's move, quote, command and control economic policies. They also say these industries are critical to the U.S. economy and the families who work in them. The states are even threatening to pull funds from any banks that refuse to lend to those traditional sectors. Axios reports the group represents more than $600 billion in assets, not small. And President Biden's plan to create over 75,000 jobs through wind power seems to have a catch. Many of those jobs are apparently going to be created in Europe. NTD's Patrick Hayden explains.
President Biden claims his plan for offshore wind power will create over 75,000 jobs in the United States. But for the first several years at least, most of the related manufacturing jobs will likely be in Europe because the US supply chain is lacking.
Bearing in mind that the industry is only just starting off in the US, so what we're having to do for this first project is still manufacture a lot of the components in other places.
The major parts for turbines, which are twice the height of the Statue of Liberty, will be made abroad, including the rotor blades and gearboxes.
We will be manufacturing them in France, loading them onto a large transportation barge, and then sailing them across the Atlantic to the site where they will be installed on the site.
Getting factories set up in the US will only happen once producers are assured of supply. They would also need government tax breaks approved to support the industry, and industry experts say that may take years. The outsourcing of jobs underscores an uncomfortable truth for the Biden administration. It's seeking to show political opponents that a transition away from fossil fuels can be good for the economy. But some energy experts say the clean energy jobs he aims to create may not even materialize at all. Jason Isaac told NTD Wednesday Biden's job estimates are about 4 times higher than the best job-creating projects in Texas, and they're far from permanent. Patrick Hayden, NTD News.
We contacted the White House but didn't immediately get a response before broadcast. The stocks closed mostly higher on Wall Street today on the back of some good economic data. The Dow rising 142 points, 0.4%, S.B.A 500 gained 5 points, about 0.1%, and Nasdaq dropped just 2 points today. The weekly unemployment claims fell for the 4th straight week, another pandemic low. Good news. A separate report showed business spending on equipment picked up speed. The data helped lift Treasury yields. The 10-year note, reaching about 1.62% today, fell back a little later to about 1.6%. And Iran is the latest country to crack down on Bitcoin mining. That's the energy-intensive way the Bitcoin network is kept up to date. The Iranian regime says miners are drawing so much power from the grid is contributing to power outages. There are other challenges for its grid too, like a drought. China, though, announced a similar crackdown last week. Experts tell us the regime there doesn't like the fact that Bitcoin can be used to move money out of a country without the government knowing. China and Iran, though, make up a big part of global mining. So what does it mean for the Bitcoin network? Ask Michael Vogel. He's a cryptocurrency entrepreneur, even helped bring an exchange public back in 2018. He's now the CEO of CoinStream, lets you buy Bitcoin with your credit cards. And I got his thoughts on the latest crackdowns.
Yeah, so the interesting thing with these types of announcements, there's always the worry, will this impact the crypto network, the Bitcoin network? You know, if miners go offline, how quickly will things adjust? The cool thing with Bitcoin is it automatically adjusts. So as miners go offline, other miners in the network can pick up the slack, and miners can move elsewhere. And just because mining happens in China doesn't mean that it can't happen elsewhere. So regardless of what happens, I think it might be a little early to tell, but the network will adjust, and you know, miners will find homes elsewhere where they're welcome.
Does it open up opportunities? We hear sometimes in America, certain states are talking about giving subsidies for miners. I believe the mayor in Miami says it wants to become the Bitcoin mining capital of America, something like this. What are the advantages to actually doing this?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as it currently stands, Bitcoin miners tend to automatically find locations where electricity is affordable or available in a surplus. Certainly in Western United States, Oregon, Washington State, where there's a lot of infrastructure set up, I think that's where a lot of miners have found homes. I think it's certainly an interesting publicity standpoint when you hear about different states offering programs like you just mentioned. I guess we'll see. We'll see what kind of impact it actually has in the long run.
What can they benefit? Do you think these states are looking for the tax revenue? Are they looking for jobs? Well, what does it bring them?
Well, the interesting thing with mining on its own, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a huge contributor in terms of jobs. Bitcoin mining operations are very similar to data centers. They're very infrastructure heavy. It's often warehouses full of machines, unlike not much unlike an Amazon data center or a Google data center. There is some ancillary effects and jobs that are related to it, but they're definitely not people-heavy operations. But I think they definitely sell a lot of electricity, and if that's available in surplus, it can benefit that way too, because electricity is a major price component to running a Bitcoin operation.
Do you worry about all of this talk, Elon Musk, etc., talking about the amount of energy it uses, etc.? You think this is a hurdle for Bitcoin to get over? You think it will get over it?
It's a hurdle to a degree. I think in many cases the extent of energy consumption, I think, is sometimes overplayed in the sense that, what about the currency? What about the energy consumption of traditional currencies like printing dollars, transporting dollars to banks, and all the energy with keeping banks open and all that, right? So there's energy consumption every time you make a search on Google, right? So I think Bitcoin, it's a little bit easier to calculate what that energy consumption is, whereas it's a little bit more nebulous when you consider the fiat money system. So that being said, it still does require a considerable amount of effort and energy to mine Bitcoin. I can see that being optimized over time, but I don't think it's as bad as many think it is.
Michael Vogel, CoinStream. And Best Buy, the last American big box electronic retailer still standing, continues to not only stand but beat analyst estimates along the way. This time, they've smashed projections by over $1 billion. NTD's Colin Fredrickson has the details.
Best Buy raises its full-year sales forecast, with quarterly revenues surging 37% year over year, beating estimates by over $1 billion.
This demand is being driven by continued focus on the home, which encompasses many aspects of our lives, including working, learning, cooking, entertaining, redecorating, and remodeling.
Best Buy continues using stores to fulfill online orders, with around 60% of online revenue either picked up at a store, shipped from a store, or delivered by an employee.
We also improved our speed to customer, as our online sales package delivery was not only much faster than last year, it was faster than 2 years ago pre-pandemic. In fact, same-day delivery to customers' homes was up 90% on a year-over-year basis.
And housing start numbers played a role, with new homeowners buying appliances, ovens, refrigerators, and so on. Another boost to Best Buy's performance. However,
the reality is there's a little bit of smoke and mirrors involved with this because there's a lot of government money that's been handed out. Yeah, it's helping boost some of these companies without a doubt. But once the stimulus runs out, we're going to see how everything kind of pans out at that point in time.
Best Buy CFO Matt Balunis says it's hard to estimate what the impact of the stimulus is, predicting it'll have less of an impact in the back half of the year. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
And the FAA has fined Boeing $17 million for a faulty wing part on its 737 jets. The faulty part was revealed in 2019 and affects some of Boeing's planes, including the 737 MAX and some earlier versions called Next Generation. Boeing must also fix the problem and issues with its production within specific timeframes, and if it doesn't, the FAA will hit the company with additional penalties totaling up to $10.1 million. Never a dull moment for Boeing. And Bayer shares dropped as much as 5% today. It's after a U.S. judge threw out its bid to limit the cost of future class action lawsuits. The cases concern allegations that its Roundup weed killer causes cancer. Bayer offered to settle around 30,000 claims in return for placing limits on the suits, but the judge rejected it, calling it unreasonable. Now, Bayer's lawyer says it will ask the Supreme Court to overthrow defeats it suffered in jury trials. Bayer points out that the EPA gave its product the green light for safety, but 3 cases have so far gone to trial, and in each one, juries awarded tens of millions of dollars in damages. HSBC says it's exiting the U.S. retail banking market and focusing more on Asia, its biggest market. Plans to sell off some parts of its U.S. business and wind down others. Libby Hogan has the details.
Banking giant HSBC said it will end its U.S. mass market retail banking. Late Wednesday, it said it will start by selling some parts of its business and winding down others. Europe's biggest bank has for years struggled in some European and North American markets, up against competition from larger domestic players. In a statement, the bank said it would exit retail banking for most individual and small business customers, but it will retain a small physical presence in the US to serve its wealthy clients. Citizens Bank, part of Citizens Financial Group, has agreed to buy HSBC's East Coast personal and small business banking business. That includes 80 branches, and its West Coast business is set to be bought by Cathay Bank, according to HSBC and separate statements from the banks.
Still to come this evening. The travel industry is trying to keep up with demand, but that might mean a more expensive summer vacation for you this year. But one expert says there are ways to stay on budget. And an environmental nonprofit and several federal agencies step in to help oyster farmers. The industry hopes to recover as the pandemic fades. That and more after this short break.
This is a tale of two kitties. This kitty uses ordinary litter. This kitty uses pretty litter, the world's smartest cat litter, and it's delivered right to your door. Its ultra-light, super absorbent formula traps odors, and it does something no ordinary clay litter can do. Pretty Litter's color-changing crystals make it easy to monitor your cat's health, helping to avoid serious illness. She's switching to Pretty Litter. Smart move. Try Pretty Litter risk-free for 30 days. When you sign up, get free delivery. Go to prettylitter.com.
90% of news outlets in the United States are controlled by 6 corporations. They're not out to tell you the truth of what's happening. They're out to tell you the picture of the world that they represent. The mission of the Epoch Times is to chase the truth, to ground all statements in facts, and prevent people from being misled. This is a battle between truth and deceit. Subscribe today and join the Americans who are seeking truth and tradition. We'd love to have you on board.
Listen, you're my friend.
I noticed you haven't really been yourself recently.
Yeah, I feel like something's up.
How are you?
Are you okay?
Is there anything you want to talk about?
I just want to know how you're feeling.
And listen, even if you don't know what to say, I'm here to talk.
No matter what you're going through,
I just want you to know I'm here.
I've got your back. When you want to talk, I'm here.
I think it's about time to polish off your mouse ears. Disneyland is opening up in June to people who live outside of California. The park reopened to local residents April 30th, but now out-of-state visitors can book reservations for June 15th and beyond. California leaders are asking people to be fully vaccinated or have a negative COVID test before going to the theme parks, and all Disneyland guests are still required to wear a mask while visiting. And good news if you're traveling. Cruising is coming back next month to the U.S. Celebrity Cruise Lines has been cleared to sail from Fort Lauderdale in June. The company's first post-pandemic journey departs June 26th on the Celebrity Edge. We don't know yet what the ports of call will be, but the CDC is requiring all cruise lines to complete trial cruises that replicate real-world conditions or require 95% of passengers and crew to be vaccinated against the virus. Celebrity is requiring vaccination proof for all crew and passengers over 16 years old. And traveling post-pandemic is more expensive than you anticipated. So how could you navigate through the upswing in demand and inflated prices this season? NTD's Evelyn Lee found out.
The good news is travel is bouncing back. The not so good news is that travelers should brace for crowds and inflated prices. Melanie Lieberman says leisure destinations will see the biggest increases in cost.
A lot of these really popular summer vacation destinations any year and ones that have really great access to the outdoors.
That especially includes national and state parks and beaches. Travel now is similar to pre-pandemic levels, but this year reduced capacity is causing bottlenecks across the industry. The travel industry was slashing inventory and fleets during the pandemic. Now they can't keep up with the increase in demand. Rental companies are so short of cars that road trippers had to resort to renting U-Hauls or flatbed trucks. Airlines are now adding new flights, but the inventory can't always keep up with demand, and shortages in TSA screeners can lead to airport delays.
I just don't think travel is as inexpensive as people expected it to be coming out of the pandemic.
So travelers who want to save some money should consider going off the beaten path.
We're also really encouraging travelers to look inland. Maybe you want to find a lake getaway. That might be a really good way to avoid some of the crowds. And even though it might seem a little counterintuitive, city vacations could be a really great deal for travelers on the budget.
But if you're not willing to compromise on the destination, flexibility is key.
Key is to be flexible with the duration of your trip, the dates of your travel. People who might have more flexibility could do a midweek stay.
And those that are looking to travel during the summer should book their vacations now, because things are selling out quickly. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And oyster farmers are working to keep their heads above water after a year of restaurant closures left them facing hard times. But NTD's Andrew Thomas tells us how one conservation group is working with federal agencies to help.
These New England oyster farmers are making money by dumping the shellfish back into the ocean instead of selling them to restaurants. It's a new survival strategy for farmers who panicked as they watched restaurant closures rock the economy. The farmers feared that unsold oysters would grow too large for the lucrative raw bar market. But a conservation group and several federal agencies came up with a creative idea to save the industry. They're buying millions of surplus oversized oysters, known as the uglies, and releasing them onto depleted coastal reefs. The plan will help reconstruct key marine habitats.
At the Nature Conservancy, we do oyster restoration to replace ecosystem services that are lost. And we typically will raise oysters and deploy them in the estuary to give the estuary kind of a jump start to become healthy again.
The program is called Supporting Oyster Aquaculture and Restoration, or SOAR for short. The initiative seeks to rejuvenate coastal reefs at 20 locations in New England, the Mid-Atlantic, and Washington State. The Nature Conservancy is spending $2 million to buy 5 million surplus oysters to release on these reefs. The initiative benefits both farmers and the environment. Oversized oysters have been removed from farmers' growing cages, making the precious space available again. Farmers can now use that real estate to raise larger amounts of smaller shellfish.
The problem is that as these oysters grow, if they get too big, they outgrow that market, the half shell market, which is our market here. And once they get, 4 or 5 inches, and this one's a little misshapen, what we would call an ugly, we won't really have a big market for them.
The oyster reefs also provide critical habitat for fish and help protect shorelines from erosion. The oversized, overstock oysters can also filter out larger volumes of pollutants and excess nutrients from the water than smaller shellfish. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's the latest business updates for today, I'm afraid. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox as starts at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.